How long does your money have to last? One of the biggest fears we have in financial planning is people are worried about running out of money. They're worried about, is Social Security going to be there, and what election should they make? Should they elect to take their pension for both lifespans, or should they take it just for one? All of this comes down to life expectancy. So how long are you going to live? And perhaps even more importantly, what kind of quality of years are you going to have? So our guest today, I'm very excited to talk to Heather Holmes, who's the CEO and founder of Genivity. And their product is Halo, which we use for each of our clients, that does custom life expectancies. And she's recently been named the CEO of, do I pronounce this right? Lumiant?
You did. You got it right.
Lumiant. So welcome, Heather, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Terry. It's so great to be a part of this. I mean, I have to say, you are one of our star Halo customers, and I'm just always amazed at the different ways that you're utilizing Halo. So excited to help educate people about longevity planning and why that's so important.
Yeah, and I've got some questions that I think might help us with our clients as we go through. And I'm going to kind of refer to some of the areas of the report. But before we get to that, what got you started in trying to figure out custom life expectancies versus just kind of the generic life expectancy tables?
For sure. So it's kind of a two-part question, and I'll try and make it brief. But I come from initially from the healthcare industry, and so I was doing kind of large scale looks at like population risk and health risk for the company that I worked for across different countries. And one of the things that we would see consistently is that people would underestimate the power of lifestyle, environment, things like that, into the impacts that it would have on developing certain health conditions. So I had that background, but then also during my career, my father had gotten very, very ill, and he had always been the key financial decision maker in the household. My mother never wanted to have anything to do with the finances, and as often happens, but you don't really think about it till you're in the thick of it. He had a major health crisis, and we were all hands on deck trying to help him get better. And at that same time, we were starting to get involved and unpack a little bit about what had been going on in their finances. And oftentimes when someone starts getting really sick, they become a little bit more financially vulnerable. And when my parents had a long time trusted advisor at that point in time, somebody had come in and it gotten my parents involved with an insurance policy that my brothers and I were questioning, did this make sense? Or did it not make sense? And we didn't know who to turn to and who to trust to better understand that. So I made a pledge to myself that if my father got better, I was going to do whatever I could to make it easy for individuals to understand and their advisors to help them to know, like, how long should I be planning for, and then be able to understand, am I in the right things that I need to make sure that my money will get me there? And so that's really what Halo is about, is providing that unbiased lens for clients and for their advisors, so you can make a good decision.
Yeah, and when we had a brief conversation a while back, and that's when I think I'd asked, hey, would you join us on the podcast someday? And I made a statement to you that I've repeated many times, where I brought up to you, was this something commissioned by the long-term care industry? And I don't know if you remember that, but I asked that, and you were a little offended by it. And the reason why I had it is I was looking at the amount of long-term care, because the reports, which we'll get into in a few moments, kind of goes through how many years you expect to need home care, and then the different levels of long-term care. And I'm looking at this saying, boy, this looks like a tool to sell a lot of long-term care. But from my perspective, I was saying, I don't think this is accurate, because the home care side, people help each other. Mm-hmm. They don't outsource it all. Yes. So they're not gonna have the expenses that are outlined there. And your response was, this has nothing to do with the long-term care industry. And those are the numbers if you are outsourcing. Of course, if you're doing it yourself, then you're basically providing that service instead of outsourcing. But if you have to outsource with somebody left alone, that's what they're going to have to do. That's the cost. And I really appreciated that, because I really looked at this report and I would downplay that section a little bit, saying, look, we want to buy the appropriate amount of long-term care and not get you into the wrong product. Because we view ourselves as fierce advocates for our clients.
Yeah.
Earlier this week, I had an interesting conversation in that section, and I was talking kind of like how I just described it to you. And the client said, before I said that a lot of people do in-home care, they said, yeah, this report is off. And I said, yeah, it is, because a lot of times people will do in-home care. And I started talking about that. And she goes, no, we spent way more than that. And we've been through every phase of this. And here's how it unfolded for us. And what it turned out is that the report was almost dead accurate. It's just her family member had progressed from home health care all the way up to where she was kind of in between the needing really high level intensive care and needing nursing care, just kind of maintenance. So she was at 100,000 a year in that stage versus I think the second stage was like 70,000 a year or something. So her perspective was that it was under. So people are going to experience all across the board what their costs are for long-term care.
Right. And, it's meant to be a piece of education, because most of us think we are going to be healthy and then we're going to never have a day where we're going to need somebody to provide care for us. But the reality is that all of us are going to be caregivers at some point, either caring for somebody needing care, and along that spectrum. But I also think it's important to understand that there is a phase of our life where we're going to start to slow down, and whether that's adult children coming to help, whether that's spouse helping, there is a cost to that in other people's time and effort. So just better to understand and frame. But I think the other part of how we frame things up in the report, and for those of you who haven't taken the report yet, we're all about trying to show you how there's ways that you can live longer and healthier, and how you can optimize so that you can increase your longevity and potentially reduce what we call those slow go years, or as Terry's talking about, those extended care years. So we break out things based on like your active healthy phase before you retire, what that active healthy phase looks like after you retire. And then when we look at those slow go years, that's one of the other areas that we break out for you. And then, as I mentioned, anything from a lifestyle perspective that you could potentially optimize, and this is a science-based algorithm that we're putting you through. You can see in real time, you can toggle on those lifestyle changes and see how that reduces that slow go phase, which would reduce those later in life extended care or long-term care costs. So it's different kinds of things like that let Terry do the magic and help you plan to live your best life.
Yeah, and we've had some interesting conversations where so when we do these reports, we talk about the genetic lottery.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't really control your genetics, but you guys have, is it like 5 or 6 questions? How many questions are on the genetics roughly?
Well, so the algorithm, the algorithm is about 20 questions, and in total. And I guess maybe I should step back and explain, when I talk about the science, this was developed out with my co-founder, Dr. Emily Chang, who did her PhD and her postdoc at Stanford in computational genetics before working as a scientist at the personal genetics company 23andMe. And it was while she was there that we were introduced, and some of the stuff she was working in the data really impressed upon her that, well, genes are one part of the equation, lifestyle, environment, those are other things that have a major impact on telling your genes whether like to turn on or off. So it's like, think about like your Christmas lights, or turning on the light in your house. It's different things that can turn it on. And so that's what the algorithm is based on. So we ask about family health history because that's the single strongest predictor of future disease risk. And just like when you go to the doctor and you fill out those forms and they're asking you anyone in your family has had heart disease, that's a really important indicator that we can then build into your future projections.
Yeah, and I think on average, our clients report that maybe 3 to 5 minutes to take this quiz to get that. And we'll have the link below in the show notes. But it really is easy to do, and it gives you a life expectancy that is sometimes very different than the standard tables, which I guess shouldn't be surprising. If you have, an average individual with, we had a client yesterday that had a perfectly clean genetics. And then we had their spouse had almost everything was in their history. So it varies widely, and the life expectancies can vary widely. And then the habits, which you ask about things such as eating, what shape your body is, which is we do these privately because we don't want them to do that in front of us.
Hmm.
But you also ask them about, how much alcohol do they drink? Do they exercise? And just some basic things, which leads to some interesting conversations because the reports that we get as the advisor gives just kind of some of the markers that are causing their life expectancy to be shorter or longer. And the habits are something, as you mentioned, you can overcome. So you can change your habits. Some of our clients are like, nope, I live this way. I love it. I'm going to enjoy the journey. And, finally live till I'm 80, so be it. And others it's a wake up call where they say, okay, I'm going to start doing some things in order to improve those areas and hopefully not only increase their life expectancy, but almost more importantly, increase the quality
Hmm.
of those years. So in the report, one of the things that come up is a section that gives your history. And in that history, it really talks about those things that are either decreasing or increasing the life expectancy. So I really enjoy talking about that with clients because it's the genetics. You can't do anything about what your genetics are. But we talk about a book, and I don't recall if you and I spoke about this, but there's a book called Outlive.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with that one?
Yes, yes.
So we often hand out copies just saying, look, your genetics, you can't choose those, but you can choose how you react to them. So if you have heart disease, being proactive in your medicine or your approach to medicine can be far better for you than being reactive and waiting until, a heart attack or something happens, which, unfortunately we've had a couple of those in our client base for people in their early 50s that things have happened. And you just wonder, have they been monitoring correctly? If they would have run certain tests that when you do your physical, they don't run them in Western medicine.
Hmm.
They're too reactive and not proactive enough. That's the message of the Outlive book. And I kind of tested it. I even told my doctor that I wanted these additional tests, and they didn't order them. They ordered the basics. And an interesting side note here is I have our kids all do robotics, and they're very much into the robotics. And there's a lot of parents there that are in the engineering, and then there's a lot of physicians. And on our team, one of the parents was a specialty surgeon, and I had come in one day and I was just ragged because I was probably recording a podcast or something early that morning, and it had been a long day. And I came in and we were doing robotics. I'm the lead parent for our team, and I'm a finance guy, so I don't know robotics at all. But I get in there and he's like, you need to take care of yourself, Terry. He's like, you've got a lot going on, but you need to take better care. I'm going to give you a book, and if you'll read it, and it talks about how important sleep is and different things. And he starts describing it, and I'm like, is that Outlive? And he's like, yeah. And I said, well, the problem isn't the book. I've read it. The problem is I don't apply it.
Yes.
But in that book, it does tell you how to be proactive in different areas and exercise. And whether it's that book or something else, it's a great way to think about, okay, these are my genetics, but I'm going to do something about it in order to give myself a better chance to be, let's say you have a 52% chance of making it to 95 years old or 90 years old, and you want to make it to 100. You want to be on the side of the curve that lets you live till you're 100, and being proactive, I think, is one of those ways to do it.
For sure. And the thing is like, well, you may have a predisposition to heart disease or that genetic trait that's passed through. Really, it's your lifestyle and your environment. It's those choices and the things you're exposed to that really tell whether that's going to be triggered. So that there is so much that you can do with diet, lifestyle, things like that. So that's really our message, is that your genes are one part of the story and they're an important part of the story, but there are so many other things that are in your control if you want to, that can potentially help you live longer. But more importantly, as you said, for me, it's all about how do you live healthier and be more active and healthy in those phases of life. And so one of our early customers came to us with a story that I just thought really hit the nail on the head about why somebody would want to take a Halo or a longevity assessment. And so they were a serial entrepreneur, very driven businessman. And he was like, I'm not retiring till I'm 75. And so he's just work, 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 work. And he took his Halo assessment, and at the end where you get to that interactive chart where you can toggle on the different lifestyle factors and things, we also put in there where do you want to retire, and where does that fit in these different phases of active healthy retirement versus slow go retirement. And when he had that in at 75, he realized that, while he thought he'd retire then and do all the travel and everything he was pushing off, he wasn't going to have as many of those active years remaining. So it didn't change his mind about he loves to work and continuing to work. But what it did do is make him prioritize doing some of those things that he said he would put off till tomorrow to start doing them today. And I think that's just the power of it, is having choices, is understanding how can you optimize yourself, and then how can you optimize your retirement to fit in all the good things.
Yeah, and in the report, those of you that are on YouTube, you can see it in front of you, but those of you that are not, I'm going to describe it. You get an analysis that basically tells you how many active retirement years, and then it shows how many you might need different levels of extended care, and then it can show lost years. The lost years is one of the really interesting things, because those are years that your habits can get back. But that area, as clients are looking at that, they're thinking, okay, if I've got, 19 active years, it really opens up their eyes to, we talk about bucket list items. So we try to get clients to dream and to get passionate about their retirement. And those are the years that you're going to be able to enjoy those. So when we're planning for the money side of it, you need more money during those active years. Once you get to the slow down years, which I use, my mother and father-in-law are great, love them to death. But their activity is almost non-existent at this point. He's in his 90s and she's late 80s. And we have Thunder Valley is a local casino here, and their biggest activity is going up and playing the penny slots for an hour, once or twice a month. Other than that, they don't spend hardly anything. So this helps us from the management of the money, because we can front load a little bit more spending on the front end. And then once you reach your slow down years, you're going to spend less. So on the financial side, it really gives us some ability to really, with a picture, show them why they're going to need more in different phases of their lives, and then be ready for that extended care, which can be very expensive too.
And I'm sure you've seen in couples when you're planning with them, everybody has their own trajectory. And so kind of marrying up those together and thinking about how do we want to help them as a couple be able to plan.
Yeah. And I have a question for you on that. So the next part of the chart is you give a chart that kind of shows a curve,
Mm-hmm.
and the curve shows kind of what a typical life expectancy is for the entire population.
Based on the person who took the test gender.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So and then the blue curve.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't realize the purple curve was gender specific. So that's
Mm-hmm.
actually something new for me. The blue curve is based on all of their answers, right?
Correct.
So that's their custom life expectancy for the group of the population that is in a similar situation as them.
Yes.
And you give, like, the example that I often see is 52% chance of
Mm-hmm.
making it to, let's say, age 92, and then maybe a 26% chance of making it to 100.
Mm-hmm.
And what I always find interesting is you take the husband's projection and the wife's projection, and then I'm always looking at, okay, you guys both have a 52% chance of making it until you're, maybe one is 92 and one is 95. So the chances of one of them making it to at least 92 is going to be in the mid to high 70s.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I would love to see on the report, if there's a way to connect the two. But that is, from an investment standpoint, there are things that are designed for you to run out of money in that age 86, 87 era. If you are going to, if you got a 75% chance of one of you making it to 95, there are definite financial decisions you should take to take advantage of that. And conversely, if you're going to, pass away early, your health isn't so good, and you're looking at a lower than normal life expectancy, you should avoid those type of investments like the plague and do
For
something
sure.
different.
Exactly.
So it really helps you make better decisions.
Yeah, and that's the whole part. It's like it's giving you this unbiased lens so that you can do your best job to help them, and they can feel confident in the decisions that they're making, around that. So you really hit the nail on the head there. And yes, we are working on a couple scenarios. So in the future,
That would be great.
you will be seeing that, but not today.
Okay. And we use this in the financial side. We use it to optimize their decisions for Social Security too.
Hmm.
So a lot of people are worried about Social Security and is it going to be there for me? So we have that discussion and then we look at really just how much money they can pick up by using your guys' analysis and applying it to their Social Security optimization and to their pension optimization. So those that are lucky enough to still have a pension where they have to make elections, this really helps in making smart decisions there too. So we love the tool. It's a big part of our practice, and we do it for every single client as we go through. So that's why you guys see us using it so much.
No, I think that's great. And I know that your audience today is probably your customers, but maybe people who are not necessarily customers yet. And one thing that we do get often asked, and I just maybe will, if I could share, is that when you go through the assessment, if you're the person taking the assessment, those answers are kept private. So if we ask you something about your weight or how often you drink, those details will never be shared with Terry or the advisor. He's only going to see a high level summary that's going to be focused more on the financial impact, on the numbers that he needs to know. So, this is something where you want to be as honest as you can be because it's for your benefit, but just feel confident knowing that well, we need those numbers to be able to get you the most personalized projections. What we provide to Terry is only around the financial stuff and the high level stuff that he needs. So we have that balance between what is shared and what is not shared.
Yeah, and your point that you want to be honest is very on point because we have clients that they go through and once they see this, they're like, well, can I retake it?
Yes, we've noticed about 10% of people will retake it. So it's always funny. Yeah, it's always funny to see that. And that's cool. People want to play around and understand, and we're all for it. It's more, much education as we can provide to people.
Yeah, because garbage in, garbage out, like
Yep.
anything else. So if they can be as honest as possible, that really gives them a powerful tool. And once they see the power of the tool, that's what makes them want to go back and be maybe a little bit more honest than they were the first time. And what's funny, when I first took this, I said, I'm exercising. So I was positive, extending my life expectancy. Well, I was on day 3. And by the time I'm talking to it about clients, I'd already gotten sick and I stopped working out. So I'm like, I need to go back and take it and be honest
Mhm.
and then see what if I do commit and stick to that exercise, how much that improves.
I have to say my two biggest weaknesses is diet and exercise. So whenever I'm running that assessment, those are always my scenarios because it's like it's such a good reflection of how just making little changes in your day can impact your life. And for me, my goal is not to live as long as I can, but to really live as healthy as I can and to minimize those slow go years. So that's, I think, really important to me. But um, do you mind if I throw a question at you though, Terry? Uh, uh, the kind of the status quo in the industry is either to just plan with actuarial tables, or I hear a lot of firms just use like a standard age, like we plan for everybody to live to age age 90. You're really differentiating yourself by understanding the personalized longevity, but how much of an impact are you seeing that on like your existing clients' plans when you're putting in those personalized numbers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a tremendous impact. So we do make financial decisions based on these reports.
Mhm.
So, for instance, you brought up insurance in the beginning. I have what I refer to as a healthy distrust of the insurance industry.
Yes.
But when you look at some of these products that provide pension-like benefits that you cannot outlive, and you've got 2 clients that both are projected to have a 50+% chance of making it to their 90s, we've done the math on those products, and compared to bonds, they provide to us a superior performance as a worst case scenario. I mean, if things go terrible and they underperform, you're still going to probably do significantly better than bonds if you're living into your mid 90s. So we'll create private pensions that they cannot outlive so that now if they do make it to that 26% chance of making it to 100, which happens more often than people think, One of our advisors here in the office, his grandmother just turned 105 a few weeks ago.
Wow. Wow.
So I mean, she would have never thought she was going to make it to 105, but if your money is gone at 90 and you make it to 105,
Yeah.
that's a big problem. So I'm a big believer in the private pensions, and this helps make that decision. Social Security, we use it in every single client. So those numbers go directly into their optimization analysis, and then we adjust based on what the client thinks, of course, but it affects our decisions, I think, more often than not. We use it as a centerpiece of what we do for planning.
I think the interesting thing is there's a lot of research out there that shows most Americans underestimate how long they're going to live. And like what we see when we look at the overarching data across all the advisors and clients that we work with is that the majority of clients who are taking a Halo assessment are projected to live well beyond the average. So seeing that enhanced longevity. And so if you're planning for the average, right, you're putting a lot at risk.
So question for you there is this, we see long life expectancies a lot. And I always wonder, is it because the affluent nature of our clientele, because we typically are managing larger portfolios and they have accumulated wealth and presumably they're taking care of themselves better, which is not always a correct assumption. Or is it because we're seeing clients that are typically in their 50s and 60s? That's typically our client, because we work with retirees primarily. So the longer you live, the longer you're expected to live, so to speak. How much do each of those two factors affect? Like, is it because they're older that we're seeing such long life expectancies, or because maybe they are taking care of themselves better?
So I'd say the first part of it is what we tend to see with clients who are financial planning clients or wealth clients tend to take better care of themselves, better health care, be more aware of those sort of things. But there also is a longevity boost. Once you get to age 65, that's where you see clearly in the data that you have outlived a lot of people in your cohort. And then you're going to start seeing additional boosts in your longevity projections once you hit that magic age. So
yeah, we always say 50s is kind of the scary decade for men in particular. And I'm 55, so I'm right in the middle of it. So I don't want to rush to 60 or 65. I want to enjoy the 50s for a while. But it is a scary time. And you look around you and you see some of the other dads, like we've seen heart attacks and we've seen different things that are just, it's just terrible for people that are just too young.
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of sense that if you get through that phase, you're going to have, like, as you referred to, a longevity boost. Can we transition for a moment over to the long-term care side of the report?
Of course.
Or what I refer to as the long-term care. So this is where part of the report is looking at kind of how much home care you projected, or what's the estimate for how much home care you're going to need, how much in assisted living, and how much in nursing.
Yes.
That's where I thought it was more than what I typically see with clients. But when you really dial down to it, it's because the home care in particular seems to be a progression where your family's helping, and then it gets to be too much. So you're getting maybe some part-time help, and then maybe it's really getting to be too much. And then that's when I think for California, it's $73,216 is what you have for home care. If you're having, presumably that's full-time in home care and in assistance. These numbers are intriguing because they do seem to be more than what I typically would think. So I take these and we try to estimate that progression of when you need care and how much. So a client, for instance, from this week had 6 years of care, but 4 of it was home care, 2 was assisted, and then 1 is nursing. I think, and maybe it's just me, but I think a lot of financial advisors, they're really focused on the assisted living and nursing home time.
Yes.
Because that's when you're definitely paying out. But like my client earlier this week, they needed help. And if mom is unhealthy and dad is also unhealthy, they can't take care of each other. They're going to have care.
Yes.
So these averages that you have, and it's funny because I'm asking the question, but I know your answer already.
I was going to say they're not average, though, because it's personalized to each client. So as you've probably seen in your different reports, there's different projected numbers of years of care. So the one that you're talking about is one on the higher end of the number of years. We can see as low as one projected year of
Yeah,
care.
yeah, I see 1 and 2 all the time also.
Yeah. So that's the power of personalization with Halo is that when we take you through the assessment, we're looking at over 100 million data points and matching each client to other people as similar to them in the data. And so when you see those years, that's based on that client, whether that's their lifestyle, their family history, the combination. And our philosophy is with Halo is to take the conservative approach. So we're going to give you the conservative number, and then you need to look at, of course, all the other factors that you know about the client's plan, the other people that they have around them, and then you're able to right size to what they need. But what we don't want to do is to not plan conservatively because you may have clients who don't have anyone who can care for them. And you need to be able to understand that. Or, as you mentioned, it could be a couple. If you look at their scenarios, they might be in those later slow go phases at the same time. And so, as you said, they can't care for each other. And so, our thing is to give you the conservative number so that then you can right size it in the plan.
Yeah, and that's perfect because if you plan conservatively and you have too much money, that's not a problem. It's when you don't have enough.
For sure. Yeah.
And then this really does help on the long-term care side. By the time we see a lot of clients, traditional long-term care is often very expensive, but self-insurance techniques with leverage is typically a great option. So you're not doing a use it or lose it type approach. But we do see clients where they have such a long projected that we try to get more of a lifetime coverage because of these reports. So this is very helpful, and it helps people to make decisions with their eyes open, and that's really all you can ask for. If they're going to take on the risk of self-insurance and their portfolio can handle it, then that's their decision. If they made it openly, then that's perfect. But if they really have a shortfall, this can open their eyes that they need to address it. So we really enjoy this section. It's just one of those areas where it's how much is going to be in home, how much is going to actually be in the facilities, and how much do we have to plan for? And it's still kind of a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
But this really helps as guide rails, so to speak. One that my clients wanted me to ask you about.
Oh, this will be fun.
Fruits and vegetables.
Yes.
We see that all the time as shortening somebody's life expectancy. I had it on my report. It's one of the most interesting ones because I'm not sure how to explain that one.
Yes.
Because they're like, well, I eat fruits and vegetables. Why is that a negative?
Yeah, it's absolutely not a negative. But if you get to the end of the assessment and that's one of the lifestyle areas that is not optimized, that's because you're not eating enough. And I think that's the problem. And I'm just as guilty of it is in the day to day, you can go through and eat a whole bunch of things, but really thinking about making a conscious effort to get the right amount of servings of fruits and vegetables has that impact.
So what's the right amount to get that off of our negative?
4 servings a day of fruits and vegetables.
That's why.
Yes.
Yeah, because too many people don't graze. They just, like I'm sitting here drinking coffee. It's not at all abnormal for it to be 3 or 4 o'clock before I eat a meal because I get busy in appointments and I had to skip lunch.
I'm the same.
It's 2 or 3 days a week, it seems like.
Yes.
And then there are health studies that say that's great. It's supposed to be fasting, which I do it naturally. But I definitely don't graze and eat enough fruits and vegetables, even though I do eat them.
Yeah. Well, I can say like I have an apple sitting on my counter right now, and most days I end up walking right past it. I set it out, the intention to eat it, and then I keep walking by and forgetting. So it's really understanding that it's 4, and if you stop and think at the end of the day, how much did I really have? It is kind of shocking how few you can really get. So it's just like I think being mindful that that's the number and trying to find ways to get that in there because it's so important.
What do you think about the supplements in that area? Like, I don't know, we see those TV commercials all the time for the fruits and vegetable pills to take. Like, does that help if you're not grazing enough?
That's a great question. I don't know. I'd have to pose that to Dr. Emily and see what she thinks about it. But I think natural is always best if you can get it and definitely less expensive. But I'm not sure. I don't know. That's a great question. I'll have to check into.
Any other areas of the report that you wanted to highlight?
No, I think
The healthcare cost is one that we hit on a little bit, but it's not as much in our lane. I mean, we don't do health insurance, but we do talk about it from a budgetary standpoint. Um, and then if that's enough on this subject, I have another question for you outside of the report.
yeah, no, not a problem whatsoever. But yeah, the out-of-pocket costs are there to help educate people from a budget perspective and to give that different lens because it is a consideration that most people don't think about, especially later in life.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big concern for retirees, though. I think advisors sometimes don't think about it as much, but it's one of the big concerns for retirees is do I have enough for my health care? And can I get the quality of care that I want? What is it going to cost?
Yeah. And especially if somebody's still working and they have a high deductible health plan, like those numbers are also helpful to see and understand, could this make sense for an FSA or maybe instead an HSA where, because of the tax benefits of investing and waiting and using that in retirement. So there's different strategies to think about with the out of pocket when you kind of understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my other question for you is really with your company as a whole. So we love this Halo report. We use it very regularly. Do you have other things for our world of financial planning, other products that I should be looking at that you guys have that would help us? Because this one is a tremendous help to us. So is there something else we should be looking at?
Well, for sure. I mean, so obviously, my company was Genivity and Halo were acquired by a company, Lumiant, which now I'm leading. And the whole philosophy with Lumiant and why I was excited about the two companies coming together was because it's taking a look at your values, like so helping clients really come up with what their core values are and then from there defining goals based on their values and so helping use values and goals to create financial goals or non-financial goals and to work with whatever planning software that you're using so Lumient's all about trying to make things a visual experience for the client so that they can really live their best life and obviously health and longevity are a huge part of that but it's really interesting when you like have an opportunity to go through a values exercise as an individual and then especially when you have both spouses do it individually and then they collectively then can look at their individual goal values and come up with their combined household values and then really start to think about how do we live by those values and setting those goals so that's
Do you guys have a similar tool that does that?
that's a software that's what Lumiant does so
So I got to learn more about Lumiant, so we can
okay
do that offline. But this one has been so helpful. I would like to take a look at that
for sure.
because we have those discussions. But the problem is we're usually having them with the husband and wife sitting next to each other,
Mm.
and one is often more dominant than the other as far as the conversation. And you can see by looks like you have to read people a lot to try to make sure that the person who's maybe less they're speaking up less to get you try to engage with them directly so that you get their answers. But something where they were doing it and you had a guide that got their values where they answered it separately. So we really know his values are his and hers are hers. That would be great. So
Yeah.
I'll definitely, if you think about it, shoot me over something, but I'll take a look at
If I,
it.
if I can just say one little thing too, that's actually how Lumient was designed. So it was designed for the what we call the non-CFO spouse, and so everything starts with that person. So they get their voice first before the more CFO spouse gets to
Yeah.
go, and they can do it independently of each other. They could do it in a session, but it always starts with the person who is less involved in the finances because we want to hold space for them to be able
Yeah.
to really articulate what matters to them, and it becomes a really neat visual exercise with the couple.
Yeah. I'm excited to look at that one because when, spouses who really care about each other, it's eye opening. Like you can see the reaction of the spouse that maybe is like, wow, I didn't know that about you, or I didn't
Hmm.
know you wanted to do that in retirement.
Yeah,
So, but a better way to bring that out would be helpful. So we'll look more into
for
Lumiant, which
sure.
I need to spend some time researching what you guys do there. So But love the Halo tool. Thank you so much for providing that to us and to our whole industry. It really is a powerful tool when used right, and our clients absolutely love it. So it's a fun conversation to kind of go through, and really opens up a lot of other conversations that are important in the financial planning world. So thank you and your team for everything you guys do over there. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Terry. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us today. And I'll look into your other products. Maybe we'll have something on the values-based one of these days.
Happy to help.
All right, we'll go ahead and put a link below for those of you that want to take the Halo analysis. Just click on the link and you can take it, and you'll be able to toggle and see your results right away. And then we'll send you a more extensive report. As well as you can just go to our website at www.weariaadvisors.com, and we have the link right there too, so you can take it from there. Thank you for listening today, and we look forward to talking to you in future podcasts. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to We Money Talk with Terry Wheeler. Be sure to click the follow button to be notified as new episodes become available. Information presented is for educational purposes only. No listener should assume that any discussions or information presented serves as the receipt of or substitute for personalized advice from We Alliance Wealth Advisors, Inc. or from any other investment professional, and is not intended as an offer of solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. We Alliance Wealth Advisors, Inc. is not a law firm or accounting firm, and no portion of this podcast should be interpreted as legal, accounting, or tax advice. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not appropriate for every individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from qualified tax, legal, or investment advisors to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation.